an interesting thing is happening, which a lot of Americans don't know about, and that is how in several of the Western European nations and elsewhere have been doing protests in conjunction with what's happening in the U.S. And Rupley is a great source because they cover a lot of stuff and they don't have any commentary about what they cover. They just do a live feed and show you pan around and show you the numbers. And of course, if you don't understand, like for instance, I just found a video with roughly covering the Black Lives Matter protests happening in Paris. So the tag is, you know, Black Lives Matter protests in Paris. So anyways, oftentimes, you know, you'll find other sources that back up what Rupley puts out by actually putting people that actually know the language and so on and so forth and talk about it. And oftentimes it comes out in other places like France 24 or Euronews or other places. And Navarro, actually, which is a independent, well, I'm not sure exactly how independent they are, but they're more like what we see from the so-called left independent media sources in the U.S. So Navarro made this point too, that like in the U.K., there was solidarity protests happening in the U.K. In front of the U.S. Embassy. So this is a thing that's been happening, and so I thought it's just interesting that a growing number of places there are protests happening, standing with what's happening in the U.S. And something that Navarro put out is that it's not just not just the killing of black people, black Americans in the U.S., such as George Floyd. It's the way that the governments all across the West, the most egregious being the UK, France, some of the Eastern European countries, Italy, and a bunch of other places, are basically doing the same things that the U.S. Australia is absolutely notorious. They're almost a carbon copy of what's happening in the U.S. You know, with the looting and the utter criminal corruption of the politicians, and the with voter suppression, with all sorts of the things that we talk about here in the U.S. is happening. You know, you could actually cut and paste what's happening in the U.S. and what's happening in Australia. So, anyways, and the Juice Media, which is Australia, from Australia, it's they do these very sarcastic, but pointing out the actual things that have actually done, and they do use a lot of profanity. But you know what? If use of profanity is offensive to you, then you need to fucking grow up. That's the way I look at it. You're a fucking child. If that offends you, um, because the way I look at it, using profanity is a way of showing how angry and how rightfully angry you should be at the at juice media likes to use a shit fuckery that's being committed against you. And if you can't do that, then you're like Jimmy Dore says, you're a cuck. You're a subservient, bootlicking cuck to authority, and it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how righteous the authority is. You you want to be peasants and serfs and bow down to the tyrannical rule, and you'll follow anything, follow any order, do anything, and that's what Jimmy talks about, and that's what Sagar and Jetty is. He's a bootlicking cuck, and I personally fucking hate Sagar and Jetty. And as far as I'm concerned, he can fuck himself. Um, I view Sagar and Jetty as a fucking danger, an enemy of the people, and he shouldn't have a platform to be spouting his fucking bootlicking cuck shit on so many people, and infecting them with his fucking stupidity, dangerous, infectious stupidity. So I don't find Sagar to be reasonable at all. When I see him, every single time I see him on Rising, I cringe and get angry. And personally, if Sagar stepped in front of me, I'd beat the living shit out of him. Can't stand that motherfucker. Because he's the same sort of Tea Party asshole that will sell you a bill of goods and then sell you down the river, just like those Tea Party assholes. And just as Bernie Sanders sold a bill of bullshit and has sold us down the river, just as AOC has sold a bill of goods and sold us down the river. No, they're all fucking cowards. They're all fucking bootlickers. Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, bootlicking cucks, subservient piss ants. What's her name from MSNBC? She's got the really short hair. She's a bootlicking cuck as well. All of them, whether it's MSNBC or they're all fucking bootlicking cucks. Cenk Uygur has a tendency also to be a bootlicking cuck. It's I've done videos talking about Cenk Uygur and saying good things about it, but I'm not like one of these bootlicking cucks who and these so-called liberals and leftists who defend the undefendable. And I won't go back and erase things. Although I've had my videos taken down by YouTube, not by me, but by YouTube. And that's Google. So if you don't know, Google is owned by YouTube. So I'm not one of those who goes back. And if I make a mistake, I will post a video and say, yeah, I was wrong, and I'll explain why I was wrong. For instance, like when I heard from the Hills Rising, which I don't subscribe to, but I do keep an eye on. And the reason why I don't subscribe to because of fucking Saga and Jerry mainly, but also because Crystal she doesn't push back hard enough or well enough, and sometimes she I think to placate will fall in line with Saga and all these other fucking assholes that they bring on. So these other bootlicking cucks, with the exception of Jimmy Dore and and Kyle Kalinske and a few others, they're all a bunch of bootlicking cucks. And so, just the way I did, I didn't generalize. I don't. While I can be accused of being generalized in some of my videos, but that generalization has reasons, and the reasons is observational facts. Like for instance, when I talk about what the politicians do, when I talk about what the police do, it's an observable fact. Like Jimmy and I are completely completely in line in that if there are good cops, particularly now with all these protests, and all the violence is being done by the police or those who have infiltrated the protests to make the protests so that they can call it rioting and so on and so forth. So where are the good police who are stepping in and saying, "Hey, none of that shit," and pulling their other so-called buddies in the police off those beating the ever living fuck out of. Where are the cops who are stopping their buddies from shooting unarmed people? Where are the cops standing in the courts or in anywhere else to say no, that was an absolute crime, it was outright murder, and so on and so forth? So I don't see it. Where are the judges who are calling it a spade a spade? Where are the district attorneys who are calling a spade a spade? Why are sheriffs after the 2008 crash going around evicting 5 million people, and these evictions have kept on happening, and now there's another escalation, and after all is said and done from the looting, we're going to see even more. So tell me, where are the good cops? That's where I get my generalization from. Where are the good politicians who do the right thing, who think critically, who look to shut down the systemic injustices and inequities? There are none. Those are the sort of generalizations I do. I don't generalize and say all white people are racist, but I do say that racism is built into the system so that inequity can be weaponized. And I often point out how a lot of white people are now going to the point where the very inequities that were baked in are being used against them. So I put in the proper nuance, proper objective facts. And I do this. So when I do generalizations, I do it because they're observable. And they are demonstrated over and over and over. So many times. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times. That could that very well go into millions. So, you know, Sagar and Crystal just did a video, and they were clearly arguing. But Sagar was horrible. He was just like Trump. He was just like Trump. And as I said, I fucking hate Sagar. And that's the reason why I hate him. Because he fucking is a fucking bootlicking cuck. He's a danger. He's that sort of asshole who looks at everything as a in the way of, I'm the hammer, you're the nail. That's Sagar. And he talks a good game, but behind it all, he's a fucking bootlicking cuck. And if he gets a chance, he'll go to get into a position of authority. He'll still be a bootlicking cuck. Bernie Sanders, a bootlicking cuck. So, Mitch McConnell, he's one of the top guys who gives the orders. But he's also at the same time, he's a bootlicking cuck to the wealthy and those above him. Lindsey Graham is the same way. As you can see, I'm not generalizing. I'm calling all of them bootlicking cucks, and high criminals, high traitorous, seditious criminals. Every fucking so-called mainstream news outlets, fucking bunch of bootlicking criminals. Sagar is so goddamn worried about property damage, masonry damage. He doesn't care that people are dying. Although he'll say, "Oh, it's a bad thing. George Floyd was killed," but then he's going on saying, "No, Trump is right." He doesn't use those words, but basically saying Trump is right. That Trump should send the military in so that he can stomp the people. The very people he's that he requires to have that fucking show on Rising. Jimmy did a great video and I liked it, where there was a bunch of fucking Fox so-called news reporters, and people were getting right into their faces and telling them to get the fuck out. Now personally, if I was there, I'm pretty sure I would have fucking assaulted them physically. I'm not 100%. I may very well been able to be persuaded not to. But I am so tempted. But that's is standing up for myself and for everybody else. It's being outraged in a righteous way. And Trump threatening to start sending in the military to do violence and probably kill a lot of people. And we know that the vast majority are going to be the poor, the black and other minority Americans. It's just another vicious cycle. And as I said, it always comes back. It's that thing of karma. It's going to come back to bite other white people, and bite it hard. White people in the U.S. and across the Western world are starting to understand that these racist, systemically racist policies and infrastructure always comes back to hurt them as well. Always. So, I say get out. I say get out there. I say get out there everywhere. Leave no place that you live, where you live, not knowing how you feel, how we feel, that we won't put up with it anymore. Get out in your small little towns. Stop going to work. Stop doing everything. Get out there and scream it and yell it and demand and tell them how it's going to be. Otherwise, we can look forward to seeing a massive escalation where, the state, the government, is using ultra-violence to regain control for themselves.